So we've discussed briefly in the past the sort of logistical networks required in maintaining the Galactic Empire, especially with some of the larger secret projects they were working on. But I figured today we'd talk about a ship that was crucial to that supply system. Let's talk about the Zeta-Class Heavy Cargo Shuttle of the Galactic Empire. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. The Zeta-Class is a relatively new ship to Star Wars, being added to the canon about the same time as the U-Wing we talked about last week. The Zeta-Class is a massive cargo shuttle utilized by the Empire to transport supplies and, on rare occasions, large numbers of troops from one location to another. Now, that's an important distinction, is that this was not built as a military transport for infantry and military equipment, and more designed for a cargo role than a logistical role in the military apparatus of the Empire. So, before we talk about its history and the role it played, let's talk about the numbers. The Zeta-Class cargo shuttle was designed by the Telgorn Corporation and manufactured by Sinar Fleet Systems, who also manufactured many of these small ships in the Imperial military, things like TIE fighters, for example. The Zeta-Class was 35 meters long, making it really large for a transport shuttle, which makes sense given its role, and it could do about 700 kilometers per hour in atmosphere, making it pretty fast, but slow in the terms of small vessels in Star Wars. It could easily traverse long distances faster than a larger capital ship, but would easily be outmaneuvered and outrun by, say, nimble starfighters, which is not surprising. As far as hyperspace, it's nothing really impressive. A primary hyperdrive that is Class 3 and a backup hyperdrive that is Class 12, so it's kind of right in the middle of the road, especially in hyperspace. Once again, it's nothing really extraordinary. It's more geared toward being an efficient way of moving large amounts of cargo. But you still want to be able to defend that cargo, so let's talk about the weapons. Its primary armament was a pair of Tamenbach KV-22 heavy laser cannons mounted on the wings of the vessel, allowing it to fire forward ahead of where it's going, allowing it to function sort of like a fighter, but that wasn't the only weapon on board. There were also 3 Tamenbach KX-7 laser cannons, which were smaller and turreted, mounted across the body, allowing the vessel to engage targets at odd angles. Now, that's not a crazy large defensive armament, but that's sufficient to stave off small starfighters if need be, at least to have a chance against small starfighters. The Zeta-Class really only needed 2 personnel on board, a pilot and a co-pilot, and the amount of cargo it could carry varied quite a bit. There was a series of modules that would actually be interchangeable on the bottom of the vessel. Oftentimes we see this with cargo modules, but they had all kinds of different apparatuses that could be strapped down there to carry different kinds of cargo, and as a result, the amount of cargo the vessel could carry could vary quite a bit and depended a lot on the sort of type of module that was installed on the vessel. So, what role did it fill? It should be a little bit obvious. I've mentioned it quite a bit. It was primarily a logistical cargo vessel. It was designed for moving large amounts of equipment and, once again, occasionally personnel from one location to another. And it was very effective at doing this. While it was slow and hard to defend, when moving supplies through unassuming regions of space, it was a pretty good option, especially when carrying an amount of supplies that was too small to be carried on a larger vessel, or at least too small to necessitate the use of a larger, slower vessel. So these would have the advantage of being a little bit more nimble than, say, a Gazanti, which would be used maybe like one step up from this. While these were used across the Galactic Empire and throughout the Empire's history, they were most notably used in the construction of the Death Star. They played a crucial role in moving key supplies to and from the systems that housed the construction elements of the battle station. It was these shuttles that really made the final stages of construction possible, and that's one of the reasons why we see so many of them on Scarif, because Scarif is where the construction of the battle station was completed. But even outside of that project, we see them all over the Empire. Throughout Imperial history, they're present at nearly every Imperial outpost and every Imperial base, as they play a key role in keeping those bases stocked logistically with things like food and weapons and power supplies needed to maintain the base. So these were a fairly common sight in Imperial logistical networks, and they'd work in tandem with larger logistical assets. These vessels could work with, say, capital ships like Star Destroyers or those large Imperial container ships we see in Star Wars Rebels to help distribute supplies where they need to go within the Imperial military apparatus. But that did make them a little bit of a target, sort of like a soft underbelly, if you will. While many other elements of the Imperial logistical network would have had some significant amount of defense, be it the turbo lasers of a battleship or the small TIE fighter complement of something like a Gazanti, the Zeta-Class would be relatively undefended in most cases. Like I said, they do have some small laser cannons on board, but against a swarm of fighters, that's really not much. That meant that these transports could be easily overtaken by Rebel starfighters if they were caught in the open undefended. As a result, they usually operated in areas that were either firmly under Imperial control or were escorted where they needed to go. A few more little interesting facts about this shuttle before we move on. These shuttles were notably often stolen by Rebel elements. For the same reasons that they're considered the sort of soft underbelly of Imperial logistics, they're easy targets for Rebel raids to commandeer. They're not very heavily defended, they usually don't have a ton of soldiers on board, so if you can move on one while it's landed and get on board, you pretty much have the vessel secured. So it was easy for Rebels to steal these. So we see a few of these in service for the Rebel Alliance, most notably Rogue One during the events of Rogue One, but there are several other instances as well. And the other thing worth noting is that they weren't exclusively military within the Empire. We did see a few of these in service of civilian institutions within the Galactic Empire, although it was relatively rare, and these ships more or less were considered military vessels. Now, I mentioned before that they usually didn't carry people, and that's because the Empire had other vessels for doing that. One of the key troop transports utilized by the Galactic Empire throughout basically its entire reign was the Sentinel-class landing craft, and if you'd like to learn more about the Sentinel-class landing craft, I'll leave a link up here to a video I made all about that. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think the Zeta-Class cargo shuttle is really necessary. After all, they have the Gazantis, which are not that much larger and not that much slower, and are better armed and protected against Rebel attacks, being able to carry small complements of starfighters, for example. So, do you think it makes sense for the Empire to use this shuttle, or do you think it was just a liability and honestly a mistake on the part of Imperial logistics? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.